Hello, my kako. My name is WāKahikoWednesday. I'm one of the culture educators here at the BishopMuseum, and welcome to WāKahikoWednesdays. Today for WāKahikoWednesdays, we'll be focusing on aspects of our newest exhibit that will be coming in August, so just a short time. And that exhibit is called Journeys, Heritage of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Now that exhibit will combine ideas about culture, natural science, history into one really spectacular display. But part of that display is also conservation. Some folks might be aware that the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands are actually a national marine monument. In fact, some folks might not even be aware that the Hawaiian Islands extend past places like Kauai and Niihau. They go miles and miles further up, where old volcanic hotspots have moved past current volcanic hotspots to create older and older islands. So even though it's the biggest island in the chain, technically Hawaii Island is also the youngest. And a small island just off Hawaii Island is also forming on that new volcanic hotspot. But you can find out more about those kind of things at our museum and also in Journeys. Primarily though, in terms of conservation, the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands represents a very special area for nature here in Hawaii. And it really extends to places that human beings don't normally go. Many of those areas are also protected bird colonies. So one of the stories that we tell in our Journeys exhibit has to do with a very particular kind of bird that in Hawaiian we call moli, but the rest of the world knows as the Laysan albatross. And that albatross is particular to places like Laysan Island, or Laysan Atoll, pardon. But in our exhibit, we use the form of the moli, the form of the albatross, to talk about another very important topic area, conservation. And in terms of conservation in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, one of the most impactful threats to wildlife, not only birds, but fish and other kinds of animals, is, as you might guess, marine debris, aka plastics. So here, we have an example of an object that will be inside our Journeys exhibit. And this is, for you maybe science folks, or you folks who are acquainted with the term, this is the holotype of a species that we are calling the Alba Trash. Yes, it is a play on the words trash and albatross, and it is literally trash. But I'm not going to waste your time here because this particular object was created using trash that was gathered from Papahanau Mokuakea, the National Marine Monument of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Now, this trash here was gathered by folks from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, and they were kind enough to donate some of it to our museum so that we could come up with a very exciting part of our exhibit to talk about how marine debris affects the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So the way we've done it in execution is we've created the form of an Alba Trash or an albatross, and it's sitting on top of its nest. It's punana. But this Alba Trash is made up of lots of different pieces of, you might guess it, plastic. Not only do we see bottles that show obvious wear and tear from being in the ocean, lots of different articles and debris, but we also see things like the back of a toothbrush and also a fish or a lobster catching trap. These are all things that end up on the beaches in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands because they're made of plastics that don't degrade over time in a short period of time, and they tend to stick around. In fact, most plastics will be around a lot longer than any of us will be. And that also goes to the idea that animals like the moli, when plastic is small enough, eat it. So if you look closely at the inside of our Alba Trash, you will see things like bottle caps. And that's because when moli are looking for food, the albatross generally tends to look for things that look like squid, its regular diet. But many kinds of plastics, like squid, are shiny and colorful. So when the albatross go down to eat it, they end up ingesting a lot of plastics. There's a term you folks might not be familiar with, it's called bolas. And bolas are the, well, let's say it's the things that the albatross brings back up that it can't digest. You see the same behavior in other kinds of animals, most often birds, but the bolas of albatross often have small pieces of plastic, along with squid beaks. What sometimes you find is that the albatross cannot process those foods. It might ingest them, but it cannot digest them. So those plastics stay in their stomachs, and sometimes they lead to the death of those animals. So this particular object is an example of trying to combine all of those stories into something that really touches at our emotions, because nobody likes to see an animal in pain or suffering, but also reminds us that if we're not careful with the conservation of the animals that we have, they're all going to look like this in the future. But I would like to also add that this Alba Trash was created with the help of two very important Girl Scout squads. They came during a sleepover to help us set the skeleton of the Alba Trash, which you can see here is also made up of plastic that comes from net floats. So really, all of this is garbage, but the concept of it is certainly not garbage. The nest itself is also made from netting, plastic netting that does not degrade. In fact, these are sometimes what are called ghost nets. So these are the kind of nets that wash up on beaches, but also entangle animals like sea turtles, birds, whales, and it can be really dangerous to the environment. if you look inside the nest too, some of us might be familiar with birds and albatross, and I'll gently lift our Alba Trash up. We have a single egg represented by another kind of net float. So a lot of fishing gear that's made out of plastic ends up in places like the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands because it doesn't degrade. But when it ends up in the stomachs of animals, sometimes it comes in the form of lighters or bottle caps, but there's also something called microplastics. And these kinds of plastics do degrade quickly, but they become small enough that they can be ingested almost like grains of rice, about 5 millimeters in size. And animals will eat these and they accumulate. And as you might be able to guess, they don't digest plastics very well. So sometimes they can also kill the animals outright. Not only in a mechanical way, as if the animal had something stuck in its throat or in its intestines, but because of what the plastics contain as it attempts to digest it. So the larger story that we're sharing here is about conservation of our environment and the very special resources that we have in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. If we want to continue to see birds like the albatross, not the Alba Trash, we have to be careful with where our marine debris ends up. And that goes on to a larger conversation that you can be part of inside our Journeys exhibit. But for now, we'll say goodbye to our Alba Trash. We just want to thank you folks for joining us today on WāKahiko Wednesdays. Tune in next week as we'll continue some stories about our Journeys exhibit, and we'll be looking at a very special person in Hawaiian culture, particularly a akua, a god, whose name is also given to the national monument itself, Papa Hanau Mokuakea. And that goddess, whose name is Papa, is responsible for creating a great deal of things in Hawaiian culture and also other Pacific Island cultures. But to hear the rest of that story, we'll ask you folks to tune in at 2 p.m. next week, Wednesday. Same WāKahiko place, same WāKahiko time. But for now, aloha and ahui ho.